Yeah, Josh, that's the thing. It is about exposure. And here in the Delta, when you have kids who literally have never left this town of, depending, it's either 1,500 or 2,500, depending if you count the prison population. Because I have a prison 2 miles from where I live, and there's a prison 2 miles from where I work. And so depending on who's trying to get a grant or federal funding or whatever, they count the inmates as population. So it depends. But it's still, regardless, a small town. And when you don't leave, what are you exposed to?
Welcome back to the Intelligent Conversations podcast. Today, I have the honor to learn from Hans Hageman. Hans is a graduate of the Collegiate School for Boys, Princeton, and Columbia Law School. Hans has served as the executive director for the East Harlem School at Exodus House, which is located in East Harlem, New York City. He also has founded a school for girls in the lower caste areas of India. He is now, as mentioned in this podcast, has proceeded to do that exact same thing in the Delta area of Mississippi. This conversation that I had with Hans was fascinating. Hans is very involved in his community, and he puts it out bluntly and lays it step by step on how you also can get involved in your community and proceed to do good things. Hans shares some incredible stories that I don't want to spoil. So without further ado, let's welcome Hans Hageman to the show. But I'm excited to learn from you. I think you have done a lot of incredible things just in your life, but also for the community around you as well. I think you've done a lot of good things. And this is kind of the question I want to start with, but that's, how'd you get into kind of like the education space? Because from what I've read, you've started quite a few schools, so you're no stranger to that.
Well, and I'll try not to go too far back because I'm getting kind of old, I realized. But I grew up in a residential drug treatment center. So we had our apartment in the drug treatment center. Then there were dormitories just below us where 50 men who had come back from the Vietnam War, who were just out of prison, were living. Another 50 men and women would come through during the day. My father ran that. He was a Methodist minister. My mother was a community activist and teacher. And so I got to see people's struggles on a daily basis, while at the same time going to a place called the Collegiate School for Boys, where I was on scholarship. The school was founded in 1628, and somebody like me was not supposed to be there, but I was. And so it was kind of this schizophrenic existence between seeing all these young men of privilege and then coming back to my East Harlem community. So I grew up with that. My father marched with Dr. King. I've got pictures of my father being released from jail with Dr. King. So all of that stuff. So I was going to save the world. And the way I was going to save the world was through the practice of law. And I made good on that promise. I made it through Columbia University Law School. And then saw every kind of legal job out there, working for the U.S. Senate as a chief counsel to a Senate subcommittee on the Constitution, as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney. And throughout, I was doing things like Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And I even did that in college. I actually last year was reconnected with somebody who I was a big brother to in Princeton. He had been in a juvenile institution, and I was the big brother to him while I was at Princeton. And he says, I was your little brother back then. And it's really weird because he's like 60 years old. It's like, so that was a little freaky. But
just some dude
so it was
up.
always, it's right. So it was always youth work. Youth work was always a part of it. Even when I was a lawyer, I was teaching street law classes to kids. And so eventually I said, I'm not saving the world like I thought I would with the practice of law. What else can I do to make a more impactful kind of signature on the world? And before the term school to prison pipeline was popular, I said, you know what, maybe if I impact young people at school age, maybe I don't have to worry about what happens at the other end as a defense attorney or as a prosecutor. So I talked to my brother who had graduated from Harvard with his master's in education and said, look, I know you're working in a public school and you can get your pension at some point and all that, but how would you like to take a flyer at starting a school? An independent school. This is before charter legislation, right? And he says, like, where? And I said, well, where we used to live, because my father had a stroke. My mother had Parkinson's. I wanted them to both stay in the place that they had created, but I also wanted to keep that environment alive. And I thought a school would be the thing. And he says, well, if you can raise $50,000, I'll join you. It was a random number. So I got $25,000 from a professional gambler and $25,000 from John F. Kennedy Jr. And we opened the school, and 30 years later, it's still going. And that got me on the path to doing the school stuff.
That's so cool. I think that's awesome. That first of all, I mean, just kind of slight question right off the bat. You said you got 25,000 from a professional gambler. Like, how did you come by that?
His family actually was partly responsible for getting me in the Collegiate School for Boys in second grade. And so my parents were friends with his parents, and we just stayed in touch with him. He eventually became like some kind of venture capital guy or something. But he started out by getting his stake through backgammon and poker.
Oh, gotcha. Dang. That's cool though that he supported that and connected through that. So I guess kind of a follow-up question on that is, what are kind of the mission like of the school, and like what's kind of the goal of starting these schools? And obviously, right, to learn and grow and get educated, but kind of what was your approach and what's kind of the mission statement, would you say?
That's an interesting question. I just got off the phone yesterday with somebody who is my next venture is a micro school and a micro school network. And these people help create structures for micro schools. I'm not a big structure guy, just to put it. And so he says, you're all over the place. You're doing too much. And I'm like, yeah, I've been doing that since 1992 and it's worked out okay. So you either want to work with me or you don't, right? So the mission statement has been very different for almost all the schools. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For a lot of the kids I've worked with, it's about just basically first survival. So kids who were falling out and disappearing and then would eventually reappear in, quote, the system. We were trying to be the stopgap. We were trying to be the lifeguards, right? So I'm not the Olympic swimming coach, right? I'm the lifeguard. And for me, school has always been a very individual, unique endeavor, and not something that I've looked at as, let me see how to scale it. And I've had people who have started actually now large charter networks who came when charter legislation came to New York and said, well, what's your plan for replication? What's your plan for scaling? I said, I don't have any. And then after, questioning me about pedagogy and other stuff, they lost interest because I was going to work with 150, 200 kids. That's it. Right. And so first it was survival, but then also it was in engaging these kids and helping them learn how to dream. Because whether it was East Harlem, I started a girls' school in India for Hindu and Muslim lower caste girls, and now here in the Mississippi Delta, there's a dearth of dreams. They're devoid of any real. They're not around people who've had dreams that have come to fruition for the most part. And again, that's throughout my experience. And so first it was teaching them how to dream, and then secondly it was giving them the skills, what are now termed, although that's going to be changing, soft skills, to figure out how they were going to move through life. And then it was catching up on, quote, the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I got so many different Orton Gillingham for reading, right? People who are science-based reading instructors know about Orton Gillingham. I got certified in that. I learned how to do Saxon math. I learned how to deliver the great books, pedagogy, so that the kids would learn the classics. I brought a guy in from California who I met at the Aspen Institute to teach a workshop for my high school students about those things. And at the same time, it also involved wellness. So even to this day at the middle school that my brother continues to run, I'm not a vegetarian, but we needed to break the kids out of their eating habits. And so we decided we were going to become a vegetarian meal school. And I kind of cheated. I had to make breakfast and lunch in addition to everything else. So breakfast, we kind of cheated, but that's okay. Nobody else was there except me and the kids. And they would show up at like 6:30 to get breakfast. And so there would be, bagels and eggs and bacon and stuff. But at lunch, no, it was strict vegetarian. And it still to this day apparently is. And so just because we wanted to jolt them out of what they had been used to and get them thinking and be conscious and aware of their nutrition and eating habits. And fine, if they didn't want to, and we had some slight rebellions over some of the menus, but we wanted them to make conscious decisions about their eating when they got older. And so I still stay in touch with kids who graduated, 30 years ago. And both the meals, that vegetarian piece was part of it, but also the experiential project-based learning, which is the other thing. I wanted them to be out there to experience life. And so what that looked like at the middle school was taking them to northern Minnesota to do winter dog sledding. Unfortunately, one of those trips happened to be in 65 degree below zero air temperature weather.
What?
And I still suffer from frostbite from that. Yeah, we were only out there for 2 days. Everything, the food would freeze literally within minutes. The water would freeze within minutes. The dogs, the huskies, they were miserable. The guide said, "Look, this is not sustainable." I'm like, "Hey, I'm with you. Let's go." So we came in, and the first thing we did before we even cleaned up or anything was go to this restaurant near Ely, Minnesota, and the kids from my school were all black and brown, and they started saying, "Why are all those white people looking at us? Why can't we just eat in peace?" And then this older white woman came over, and she said, "We've heard about you kids on the news. Nobody was out in that weather. You guys are heroes to us, right?" And so all of a sudden then, right, that racial divide evaporated. And these kids realized that they were being recognized and seen for something that they did that was courageous. And so those learnings, they never have forgotten. My high school kids, we would go on service trips to Nicaragua, Ghana, Senegal. And I've got students now who have made traveling a part of their lives. I've got one student, she's a contractor out in Alaska. She works 6 weeks on and then she's 6 weeks off. But they never would have ventured out to the wider world if we hadn't had those experiences. And those were just as important as getting their literacy skills up, as getting their math skills up. And so we have kids who one guy's a talented butcher. I've got somebody else who came into the school from special ed, and she completed her doctorate, including dissertation, and she's a PhD, right? So it ran the gamut, ran the spectrum. And so it's finding the kids where they are, meeting them where they are, helping them dream, helping them develop passions, and then through experiential learning, project-based learning, an individualized approach. And my brother and I differed on that one, but that's why I'm in Mississippi and he's still running the school in New York, is how to approach it. And that's what I'm doing down here in Mississippi. There's nothing here. There is nothing here. And it has the lowest labor participation force in the country. Employers complain that the people aren't ready to work. They don't have the skills to work. It has the lowest life expectancy, the highest infant and maternal death rate. The particular
just
county that I work in
overall not good things.
Overall not good things. The lowest ACT scores. And so what do you do, right? You're not going to open up a store and like, oh, we're going to make the kids employable. That's not how it's going to work. So we're trying to jolt the kids out and do that through our micro school network and a mix of traditional and modern things in terms of the curriculum.
First off, I like the approach that you take to like project based. I agree with that. I honestly think just education in general needs to move more in that direction because you have a clear objective of what you want to accomplish, and it's something that's usually pretty hard, but also you kind of have an interest in it as well to get it done. And it's crazy, right? Like you're like, what the heck? Like, I don't even know if this is possible. And I like the point that you made that you first have to get them to dream, because you first have to have hope before you pursue anything hard. Because if you don't even have hope to begin with, it's just like kind of sit back and like raise your hands up and say, I can't accomplish this.
No, absolutely. I mean, the installation of that. So down here, I mean, things were also different. When I first got here, I guess in my first couple of months, I said, I'm on the Mississippi River. There is so much history. And one of the instructors back in my middle school days, Eddie, I'm blanking on his name, but he wrote a book, Mississippi Solo. He was a black guy who canoed the length and breadth of the Mississippi River in a solo canoe.
Jeez.
And that always stayed with me. And I said, and he talked about that history and not necessarily from an African-American perspective, but just as an individual trying to see what the history of that river would teach him. And I'm here in the Mississippi, and the Mississippi River has been so important in the lives of people who were slaves, sharecroppers, in whatever manufacturing was here, but then subsequently left. And I started asking the kids, I say, when was the last time you went fishing or canoeing on the Mississippi River? They look at me like I was crazy. My 22-year-old son said, he says, stop talking to them about the Mississippi River. He says, black people and rivers don't go together. He said, stop it. And I'm like, you're a jerk, right? But that actually was the sentiment down here. It's like, no, we don't do that. But I eventually got 15 kids to agree, and their families to agree, to let us go with an outfitter in an adjoining town. And we took an all-day trip on the Mississippi River. And that trip, I mean, I had kids in tears, including an 18-year-old. I can't, and nobody here can swim, right? But I said that's what life preservers are for and all that stuff. But it was transformative for every single kid, and even kids who were too scared to go and did not go came up to me after the trip and said, "Next time, I don't care what my mom says, I'm going on that trip." Right? And so it's. And the outfitter said, he says, look, I've been working here in 25 years. He says, nobody from Tutwiler has ever gone on the river as far as I know. And so it's those experiences that we're trying to do. And so it's the history there. It's the civil rights trail here. It's the blues. It's the traditional African-American quilting. But it's also, we're bringing in robotics and virtual reality, right?
That's cool.
We're hitting enough different points that these kids will find something that they're interested in.
Oh, I'm sure. So talk to me a little bit about, so you said that you'll find something that each kid is interested in. I believe everyone's unique. How do you kind of, I guess, manage to do that? Because, I mean, it's a pretty big world out there and there's a lot of interests. So how do you kind of expose them to as many interests as possible?
Yeah, Josh, that's the thing. It is about exposure. And here in the Delta, when you have kids who literally have never left this town of, depending, it's either 1,500 or 2,500, depending if you count the prison population. Because I have a prison 2 miles from where I live, and there's a prison 2 miles from where I work. And so depending on who's trying to get a grant or federal funding or whatever, they count the inmates as population. So it depends, but it's still, regardless, a small town. And when you don't leave, what are you exposed to? And so some of that, it comes through, for me, it's always come through the world of books. So trying to get them to really grasp that.
Indeed.
It's this virtual reality piece. The program that we're going to be working with, they have crime scene labs, chemistry labs.
That's cool.
Just international tours, all that kind of thing. So it's going to be that kind of thing. But we're going to be taking the kids in the spring to Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, where most of these kids, forget Princeton, right, or Columbia, Ole Miss they would never even consider. But the head of the classics department reached out to me because somebody told her about what I'm trying to do here, and she came down and said, "Look, we would love to do a test pilot program where the kids learn the classics. So we'll come here 3 weekends, and then every fourth weekend you come out to Ole Miss so the kids can see the campus. We'll show them around. They'll meet students. They'll meet graduate assistants. And so it's going to be those kinds of things. I also intend, just like I did in my other school, they're going to be traveling internationally if I have anything to say about it. So, and I've had kids say, I heard you're going to Africa. And I was like, yeah, I know. You're going to tell me that's crazy. I said, no, I want to go. This is a 13-year-old, right? So just getting people thinking that way, because when I first got here, it also coincided, literally within a month of getting here, I had somebody come down from Princeton as an intern, a freshman. I was trying to get freshmen from Princeton here, and the office told me, they said, look, we don't want this publicized. Here I am on your podcast saying it, but
that's all right.
There's not a lot of interest in going to the Delta. The students here are afraid. I'm like, I said, tell them there's an old guy from Princeton who's here. He spent most of my life in New York. There's nothing to fear. They should come down. The only student who came down was this kid, a freshman from the Philippines. And I got his backstory, and it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense, because he was kind of a gadfly and a troublemaker, and he annoyed on social media some of the big power brokers in his small town in the Philippines. So much so that they burnt down his family house and his family's business 2 months before he went to Princeton, right? Wow. So why wouldn't this kid? He wanted to see what the differences and similarities were between his rural life and the life of the descendants of slavery in America. So to his credit, he came down for 10 days and was very helpful actually in that short time. And so we benefited from that. He went back with this new sense of energy, and he's apparently tearing it up as a leader on campus in a variety of different things. He invited me back, and I got to speak to 150 freshmen. But he came and he spoke to some of the high school students, and he was asking them about their careers. And he was dumbstruck when they had no interest in government, school, or otherwise. When the only professions he heard was professional athletes and truck drivers. That's it. And it hit me a little hard too. I thought we were going to hear something else, but again, it's exposing them to different professions and something else. And I'm an oddity, and that helps because when the kids get a little comfortable, they'll come in and ask me questions. They also need to know that I respect them, so that we have one young man. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to take the ACT. I'm going to go to college." And I was like, "But you've talked about becoming an electrician, and despite the fact that he's not in your life right now, you wanted to be a farmer like your father. What about those things?" I said, "You don't necessarily need a college degree for those things. And you could always get that later if you find that it's important." And he just looks at me and he's considering it, and you see it. And down here, if you commit to agriculture, you know, even though they're mostly commodity crops here and not really healthy stuff, you can still make a really good living. And forget about it. If you're an electrician, a carpenter, or a plumber, you'll make a killing. So why are you going to take on college debt when and you're not even that interested in college, and you got some questionable study skills? Why wouldn't you go full force into the agriculture and becoming an electrician? So we're going to start a small garden in a small plot that we have. I've told him, you're going to be responsible for this, and we're going to start a hydroponics piece in one of the rooms that we have. I said, and you're going to coordinate that. I said, and if you produce enough, we'll figure out a way to get it to the market that's like an hour away, a farmer's market, so he can get those skills. I mean, so it's things like that. And then when other kids see what's going on, they'll say, we didn't know that was possible. I guess this guy's not that crazy. Let's see what's going on.
I think, again, it comes back to just having that dream, right? Like clearly what you stated with that student there, like he had a dream of being a farmer or electrician. And then kind of sometimes we get like all these, especially nowadays with technology, all this voices are saying, hey, you need to do this or that. And it's like, hey, like learn to trust yourself and say, yes, this is what I want. Like, I'm going to go after this.
It's incredibly important. And unfortunately in our society, and again, people will look at me and it's like, oh, you went to an elite private school, then you went to Princeton, then you went to Columbia, but all those experiences. But I also was in ROTC right after the Vietnam War, when it was really not popular to join the U.S. military. Right, I went to the 101st Air Mobile Training School in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Anniston, Alabama, where I was with people from men and women from all around the country. And that was invigorating and enlivening and enlightening for me, right? So I kind of have a sense of what that is. But one of the things that also I know is that, and hopefully that'll change, is the work of the head here has always been valued over the work of the heart and the hands. With artificial intelligence, that's going to have to change, because artificial intelligence is going to take over the work for a lot of people of the head. And the heart and the hands work is the stuff that people are going to have to figure out how to do and how to make a living doing. So I'm hoping that paradigm, that will be for me a good paradigm shift. I'm not freaking out with AI because I'm looking forward to that shift.
Exactly. It's, yeah, like you said, there's going to be more work with the heart and the hand, and you got to be ready for that. And I mean, you also mentioned earlier the plumbers and electricians make a killing. I'm like, I can confirm that. It's almost
really?
Ridiculous because everyone pushed college and everyone went, and it's kind of looked down on 20, 30 years ago to go get one of those jobs. But now it's like, wait, we need plumbers, we need electricians, and you can't find them. And it's like supply and demand. If there's only like 2 or 3 people that know how to wire your house, they can charge whatever they want. And
that's right. You're
kind of screwed.
That's right.
So I want to ask this though. So you're doing a lot of cool things, and I mean the trips especially, you want to get them internationally and just even nationally exposed to as many people as possible and many possibilities. I think the key question here is, how do you like fund this? Because I'm sure it's not cheap to just haul a bunch of students across the U.S., across the world.
Oh, there's something called increasing your luck surface area. I think I'm pretty good at that, and from early on. And so early, when I was starting the school, I started my first school, started it off as an after school, right? And part of my day, I would put myself away in an office, and just because the internet was not, you couldn't do it like that, I had to write letters, right? I had this big book of this directory of foundations and corporate giving and all that. And I just went down that list, and I had another book of people at TV stations and news outlets. And I wrote them. And eventually I got hits from the local news. And from that, I built out nationally. And then also the same thing with foundations. I mean, I mentioned John F. Kennedy Jr. got me the other $25,000. At that time, he also joined something called the Robin Hood Foundation, which was new at the time. And he became our advocate at the Robin Hood Foundation. We eventually became we had the Heroes Award from the Robin Hood Foundation. And at that award, nice. I met, the Serena and Venus Williams. I was tapped on my shoulder, and I turned around, and this woman said, "I love the work that you do. Me and your husband want to come check it out one day." And it was Beyonce and Jay-Z, right? I was invited to a party where Oprah was introducing herself, and she asked us to. Her producer asked us to be on her show, but my brother didn't want to turn over his tax information. Don't get me started. But it's, and hopefully, I guess he doesn't have to regret it now. But so early on, I was put in a circle where I was able to fundraise and expand my network, which is what I tell these kids here. You've got to expand your network, and right now I'm it. So be nice. But learning how to write grant letters, learning how to tell a story, figuring out where people were in terms of their philanthropic giving, that helped. And I've had some early supporters who have stayed with. I've got one guy who's worth, by some estimates, $300 million. He's been a supporter since, and I met him at a gym. I was spotting him on the incline bench, and he's like talking like this and talking like that, like a New York thing. And I'm like, and then he asked me where I went to school, and I told him. He goes, "Yeah, I went to Harvard." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure you did." And so I said, "Let me test him because my brother went to Harvard." He goes, "I know your brother Ivan. We're good friends." I'm like, "Get out of here!" And so this guy's like a legend on Wall Street and in the hedge fund world. But he supported me since 1992. So again, the luck surface area increased, and so some of that has gone on. Bringing it down here, I've got a billionaire who gave to the gardening project. I'm not even going to mention his name because he's very controversial right now. And I'm on his side because he sees me, he sees these kids, and made the donation. Right? I've got other people who have other kinds of politics, but they haven't donated a dime. So like, okay, I know which side I'm on. And so the fundraising continues, and I have to think out of the box. I've got a friend who I've been friends with since 1976, freshman year at Princeton. And she's had a variety of careers. I've had a variety of careers. And I saw that L'Oreal, the cosmetics company, this giant cosmetics company, is looking at ways to motivate their older workers. I'm like, you know what? We're older. We work. We've done a lot of different things. Let me pitch this guy on us coming in and giving 50% of any proceeds L'Oreal wants to pay to us for consulting with them and coaching their older employees. It'll go back to the center. It's a long shot, but I emailed this. I messaged this guy on LinkedIn. 10 minutes later, he says, "Mail me your proposal as soon as possible." Right. So it's stuff like that. It's never about. And I tell my son this because he's like, "I'm not creative." I said, it's not about the how. It's about the now. You've got to take action, move forward. You're going to get rejected, but you got to deal with rejection and learn from it. It's you're not winning and losing. You're winning and learning.
I like that last statement you said there. It's not winning and losing. It's winning and learning. Like you're just learning. I'm going to use that, by the way. I like that statement.
I'm sure it's not original. I don't know where it came from.
But no, I haven't heard of it. So I'm definitely going to use that because I'm a competitive person. I don't like to lose sometimes. But learning. Where do
you compete, Josh? What kind of things do you compete in?
Oh, if someone says, "Hey, you're going to be number one here," I go for it. And
okay, I like.
Doesn't matter what it is, but sports, especially like any type of athletic competition, sometimes I'll get way ahead of myself. Like someone that can obviously like clearly bench more than me, they'll be like, oh, I'll go up and say, all right, I can do 400. No, you can't. And the guys, they'll laugh. They'll be like, no, you can't do that. And it's like, well, but then I'll try it. And then I'm like, yeah, can't do that. And you learn, right?
That's right.
Maybe I do have limits.
But I was going to say on the physical piece, that's something that I learned early on, that, maintaining that edge, and it served me well. So whether it's here with the kids who want to play basketball against me, and I'm like, I'm not that. First of all, I'm 5'9", I'm 65 years old. You're a high school basketball player who's 17 years old and can dunk. I mean, so all right, whatever. But if I can move at least halfway, and then they find out I'm old enough to be their grandfather, there's a certain the level of respect changes. When I created the first certified breathwork training program in a prison in New York, maybe in the country. This was at a maximum security prison for teenage boys who had been convicted of extremely violent crimes in adult court. And they were always testing me. They wanted to see how many pull-ups I could do on the chain link fence, which really hurts your fingers, by the way. Or could I outdo them in push-ups and all that? And when they saw that I could keep up with them, the conversation changed. And there was less of a physical implied physical challenge, and they're like, okay, let's see what else this guy has to do. But again, I'm not going to be at 65. I'm not going to be competing at the ultimate peak of my abilities, but getting there at one point when I was younger and then trying to maintain to the extent that I can has served me well. Yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know you did that. Chain link fence, man.
Yeah, it hurts.
I can't imagine that. That's cool. I think that's so cool, though, that you're just so involved in the community, and you're actually like making real change, to be quite honest. And it goes to show, I mean, you even mentioned this in one of your earlier, it's that you have to take action. And I mean, we could sit here, right, and talk about this, but at the end of the day, it actually takes like you doing something to make meaningful change. So I guess with that, how can people maybe be more engaging in their communities and just overall help people that may be at a disadvantage in life, or kind of help them break that cycle? Because sometimes I feel like we get stuck in cycles. How can we help like break some of those cycles and help, obviously, society just flourish, which is, I think, the objective everyone wants?
I think most people do. Sometimes it's hard to find them, but I at least the two of us do, right?
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of it has had to be getting people to self-actualize and to be at their best, and a certain level of awareness of who they want to be is the start. Because if they go out there and try to help and they haven't figured out who they are as human beings, it's not, there's going to be a disconnect, and people will pick that up, and it'll be viewed as being inauthentic, or the person will be viewed as distant. So first, getting some level of self-awareness, and that can be done through, depending who, what your orientation is, right? Prayer, meditation, breath work, movement, doing that, then taking an inventory of your skills, and there's I think it's the concept of ikigai. What are you good at? What do you love to do? What does society need? And figuring out where, in a Venn diagram, what are the intersections of those things? At some point, and usually it has to happen when you're older, but the earlier somebody can do it is better. You've got your resume virtues and how you're going to move ahead, and everything's transactional, and you're trying to make the most money, and I get that. But also at some point, you got to do what David Brooks calls your eulogy virtues. How do you want to be remembered? And then when you figure that out, when you take in that inventory, when you've developed enough strength and personal awareness, you can go out, and just the connection where somebody who's sitting across from you, whether it's at a homeless shelter, or a food giveaway, or a youth program, or whatever, they're going to pick up that you see them as real human beings, because you've identified that who you are with all your flaws and shortcomings, that you love this person sitting across from you, and that you're all going through some kind of struggle, through some kind of story, and you're working on your story, but you want to help them with theirs. You don't need many more skills than that to begin.
There you go. Wise words there. And I mean, You shared there kind of the self-actualization, and I mean, we mentioned this at the start of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Everyone has needs that we need to have in order to, be awesome human beings and go out. And that self-actualization, I mean, in the pyramid they showed this to us in school, but like it's kind of the small thing, but I'm like, no, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's when you kind of realize, like, wait, anything's possible. Like once you solve those bottom tiers, like that's the thing. It's the base, it's the foundation. But then after that, you can go as high as you want, and it's only your dreams that contain you.
That's absolutely right. And that's the hardest part, because in a place like the Mississippi Delta, just the basic survival needs, or creating a sense of community, all those things have to be set, right? And so part of my challenge is I work with younger people, right? The next youngest person is 45. The other staff people are in their 20s, right? And so it's letting them know that they have to play a role if they want their community to survive, if they want to make a name for themselves, if they want to have more meaning in their lives. And yeah, people here, they need to know that they're going to eat, right? And so you got to take care of the base of that before you move up. And even beyond self-actualization to self-transcendence or something, which I think Maslow may have written about just before he died, is what has to happen.
I agree. Well, Hans, I've appreciated this conversation. I don't want to take any more of your time, but for people that are interested in reaching out to you or just getting involved with your kind of work, what's the best way they can reach out to you, find you, all that fun stuff?
Well, I was trying to get up a landing page where people could do that. I haven't done that yet. Maybe I will before you post the show. But I'm Ronin for life. Ronin being a masterless samurai. Ronin for life on Instagram.
I love that.
And then there's the Tutwiler Community Education Center. So if that's Googled, or people can reach out to me on my own my email at hans@hanshagemancoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hans, for coming on and sharing all the cool things you've done and the stuff you've done just for the world and the legacy you're leaving for everyone. So thank you. All right, everyone, as you can tell, that is Hans Hageman. He's a very intelligent person, has great things to share. I challenge you guys, if anything spoke to you today or you liked what Hans had to share, to reach out to him. He left the information there for you if you'd like to get involved with him. Stay tuned till next week. We have a great guest lined up for you guys. See you guys next week, and let's get after it. Hey everyone, if you liked this episode and would like to hear more, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. We release a new episode every Wednesday for you guys to listen to. Thank you guys so much for the support that you give. We could not have done this without you guys. If you would like to be a potential guest on the show, check out intelligentconvos.com and fill out the form there. Thank you guys again, and let's get after it.